Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's been way too long since we've had a chance to get together on Friday afternoons for the Happy Hour Live webcast. I'm Mark Gillespie, and good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world right now. It is 5 o'clock New York time on a Friday afternoon. Time to have some fun. Uh, I have missed you guys. It has been a fun couple of months off, but we've reimagined some things. We've taken a look at some things. I want to thank some of you that took the time to send us nice emails about what you'd like to see with these webcasts. Juan Cruz, especially, for a nice long email this week. I have not gotten back to you yet, but I will on that one. I wanted to digest what you had to suggest. We are always open to feedback, and it is good to have you guys back here. From Tyrone Cote, greetings from Nova Scotia, where we're waiting for Hurricane Fiona to hit. I hope I don't spill my Dewars. I hope you don't spill either, and I hope you guys stay safe in Nova Scotia. And I will see you guys in Fredericton, New Brunswick in November. Now, let's see what else we have in here for comments already. Graham Frazier joining us in Edinburgh, but jumping on a train home. Good to be back. Watchman 999 in Calgary. Woot woot. And Greg Serafian in Paris. Curious about Stephanie's reveal. He finally managed to find a Dewar's 8-year-old Caribbean Smooth bottle. So let's just start in right with that now. Bring in Stephanie McLeod, our friend from Dewar's, the master blender for Dewar's. And you have a new 12-year-old blend. Tell us.
I do. Thanks for having me on your show, Mark. It's a real pleasure to be on with you. It's 10 o'clock here in Scotland. It's now dark outside, and it always takes Scottish people by surprise when it gets dark. It's the same thing that happens every year, but we all go, oh, look how dark it is. But anyway, yes, we have got our reimagined, our evolution, I think, as you put it, of our beloved Dewar's 12. And, Dewar's 12, it's a blended Scotch whisky. So it's a blend of malt whiskies and grain whiskies. And at Dewar's, we double age all of our blends. And what that means is that we take the blend and we put it back into oak casks for an additional period of maturation. And that is to allow the disparate characters of the malts and grains to interact with one another, to combine, and to give an enhanced perception of smoothness. And what we did, and in our standard Dewar's 12, we would double age in casks that had no more maturation potential to give. So it was basically a wooden vessel in which all these interactions happened. And then we were working on the Dewar's 19, and we put that into bourbon casks. And we got a really beautiful result from it. And it just seemed to sort of bring the whole blend to life. And so we thought, well, why don't we try that on Dewar's 12 and see what happens? And, bourbon is part of the wood profile of Dewar's 12. So we use bourbon casks, we use refill casks, we use sherry casks, we use dechar rechar casks.
Let's explain what those are for folks who aren't familiar with dechar rechar.
So dechar rechar is when we rejuvenate a cask. So in Scotland, we like to use casks a number of times because you can still get a lot out of a cask. You can't, we don't just use them once and then move them on. We use them a few times. But rejuvenation is when you scrape off the inside surface and then set it on fire to create another char layer. Now, this doesn't take it back to being a new cask, but it does give it, another lease of life. And so that's what a dechar rechar cask is. And bourbon is very important in that wood profile. And so by double aging it in bourbon, it amplifies the vanilla and the creamy toffee notes that we find when we use bourbon casks. And this double aging in the bourbon just brings it all to the fore, and really makes for, I've got some in my glass here, just a really succulent and a really, it's almost enlivened. Actually, it's been given a boost with using the bourbon casks. And bourbon casks do take quite a while to yield what they have to give when you put a new make spirit in them. But for this double aging process, it really didn't take that long in order to see the vanilla coming through much more to the fore. So that's 3 months, up to 3 months that it's lying in the bourbon casks. So again, it will take a lot of careful planning to ensure that the stocks are ready, and we're getting lots of amazing feedback actually on our new Dewar's 12. So we're really making sure that we've got everything set up, that we're ready to go, because I must stress it's the same recipe that we've always used. The only difference is the double aging is taking place in bourbon rather than in the inert casks that we used before.
But that still is a new generation. And as Greg Serafian points out, he's tried 3 generations of the 12-year-olds so far. How often do you reimagine these core blends in the range?
We try to, we change the look of the bottle, quite a lot. But we don't change the recipe. So, and I think sometimes people think because we've changed the look of it, then we've changed the spirit. But this is the Dewar's 12 that was, the recipe that was launched in 2000, I think it was. But really all we've done to it, and it's made such a huge difference, which we wouldn't really have predicted actually. By double aging it in the bourbon casks, it has given it this new lease of life. So, it's the same recipe, same recipe structure, same wood profile that we were using in the year 2000 when it was released.
Except for the new bourbon casks.
Except for the new bourbon casks, yeah. So the recipe's the same, but the treatment that we use for double aging has changed, and my goodness, what a change it's made. So we're very excited about it. And it's always quite nerve-wracking when you're launching something out into the world for the first time. And, it's like a child, will people like it? Will they say nice things about it? Will they want to play? And so far, it seems to be getting lots of friends. So we're very proud.
How long will it take to roll this out into the marketplace?
Well, at the moment, who knows with the logistics, but we are certainly working very hard in our bottling plant to ensure that we're getting stocks out to the US. So the US is the first market to receive this enhanced version of Dewar's 12. It's also got a new look to it as well. So We've got lots of these, I'm not sure of the color, but sort of a deeper copper and more grey color coming through. So it's a different look, and it is, you know, a different feel to this whiskey. It's almost like when you have it on the palate, it's as if you can chew it. You know, there's a lot to it. You know, it's beautiful.
This may be a big controversial comment, but from Greg Serafian, who thinks that some of the creaminess has been a bit lost with the recent rebranding, in his opinion, but he might be wrong if he compares it to his older one from 2013, and there can be batch variations, he thinks.
Yeah.
And how much of a variation is there between batches? That's your job, is to make sure that there are no variations, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, there should be very, you know, we're looking for them to be no variations. You know, we want our, you know, whiskey drinkers throughout the world to, you know, when they pick up a bottle of Dewar's, they'll know that the next time they pick up the bottle, they'll get the same flavor experience. So there really shouldn't be noticeable differences. I mean, we sometimes have to change the makeup of the components of the recipe, but all of our inventory is split into categories. So if one particular malt isn't available on the day that we are blending, then there will be a substitute that has the same flavor profile. But as I say, sometimes when we change the packaging, and I know this myself, you know, if there's something that I buy normally and the look of it changes and the look of it isn't to my taste, then I sometimes then perceive that I perceive something different in the taste. But yes, we take great care to ensure that there are no differences. So, but it's interesting to hear these comments. But the recipe, as I say, it hasn't changed. It has never varied since it was released in 2000.
Interesting question from Dave Kuhn. He always wonders, and he says he ought to know this by now, but when someone says grain whiskey, what is the most typical grain that usually entails? Does that mean it's just not malted barley? What grains are going into it? I know there's a lot of maize that goes in once in a while in some distilleries.
Yeah, so maize is used and wheat is used. It's mostly wheat, but that can change. So, and sometimes that can be determined by cereal prices. You know, what a distillery will use, but it gives very different results actually using wheat and using maize, and even differences between different distilleries. So I think some people think that, you know, you can put any grain in and it doesn't really matter, but grain really does have a real effect on the whiskey, and you can tell the difference between different types of you know, grain distilleries. And sometimes you might detect a difference between whether they've been using maize and maybe they've had to switch to wheat maybe partway through a year. So I mean, the differences are subtle, but you know, we try to have more than one grain distillery as an option, so that we can kind of, again, blend the different flavors of the grain whiskey as well. So it's a great question, and grain whiskey plays a very important role in a blended Scotch whiskey.
I've often thought that single grain whiskeys are great, for instance, during the summertime, just because they're nice and light. They don't have the heaviness that some single malts do, or even a few blends.
Yeah, and they, they're filled into cask at a higher strength, so they seem to absorb more of the wood much more quickly. And, a grain whiskey that has been matured in a good bourbon cask, it is a thing of beauty. It really is. And sometimes people who tell me that, they don't like whiskey, but they would like to try it. I always say, well, first of all, try one of ours, so our Dewar's 12. But I also say, try a grain whiskey, because it's a kind of gentle introduction into the flavors that you encounter in Scotch whiskey.
Question from Chris Ratcliffe in the UK, who's noticed Dewar's starting to show up on store shelves now more often. Let me get the question up here. I probably actually deleted that question. Oh, here it is. And he wants to know where the big markets are for it. Obviously, the US is the biggest market for it. And how does that influence the new expressions being planned?
How does it? So was this one about the supermarket shelves?
Yeah. He's noticed Dewar's starting to show up more in supermarkets in the UK or in the London area.
Yeah. Sorry, I've got a dog barking here. Yes, so that is something that we have wanted to do for a long time, was to be present in the UK market, because the people that work for Dewar's in Glasgow, they love nothing better than when they're going out at night to see the products that they've made. And so it's been very important to us to get it out on the shelves. We were not planning on, expressions that will just be for the UK. So the UK will receive the same expressions that, the rest of the world get, unless it's something that we made for our Aberfeldy Distillery Visitor Centre. So we'll often send them, individual casks, and which people can go up and fill, a bottle, and can have it engraved, and put a little funny story on it if they want to. So that's where we kind of have things that you can really only get if you're in the UK. But yeah, it's exciting for us to see our products on the shelf, and to see people drinking them in bars and having them in cocktails. And we do a thing called Back to the Bar, and we haven't really done one since before COVID, I don't think. But it was great just talking to people about whiskey. And a lot of people, think that they don't like whiskey, and then you say, well, why don't you try whiskey cocktail? And suddenly they think, right, okay, so there's nothing to be scared of. So yes, we're making a big push, and we really just want to, spread the word of Dewar's, and just for people to see, the complexity that can be achieved in a blended Scotch whiskey. And that, for our cask series, we often associate finishing with single malts, expensive, highly priced single malts. But we have applied finishing to Dewar's 8-year-old blended Scotch whiskey. And, people have really appreciated it, especially bartenders. I hear them, it seems to sort of set alight their creativity, because each one has, its own particular character, and, it just lends itself to cocktails. So that's really what we've tried to do, is to kind of democratize Scotch whiskey, and not just to have, a set of rules. These are the rules of engagement for single malts, and these are the rules for blended Scotch. We've just kind of mashed them together and just exploring with our natural sense of curiosity about, you know, what can we do with Scotch whisky to bring it to the fore in people's minds when they're choosing a drink of an evening.
We should talk about the latest release in the cask series, the French Smooth.
Yeah.
That's a brand new one, right?
Yes. Well, I think it's new in the US, but it's a project that, you know, we started off with Caribbean Smooth. We've had Portuguese Smooth, Illegal. We also had Japanese Smooth with Mizunara casks. And then we came across Calvados casks. And, you know, I was explaining to our brand team, you know, what Calvados casks are. And, you know, I was talking about the apples. And they said, oh, is it going to taste of apples? And I said, well, you know, I can't promise that there's going to be a real, you know, prominent or dominant note of apples. I said, but, you know, we'll see what happens. And I remember sampling after a month, and I thought, oh my goodness, I can smell apples. And I was quite astounded, because I thought it would just be kind of like a hint of maybe a distant memory of an apple or something. But I remember giving it to someone in the lab who had no notion of what this product was. And I said, what are you getting when you smell this? And they said, oh, is it like kind of like apples? Yes, great. So that was wonderful, because obviously, you know, what we're trying to do whenever we finish, and especially for our cask series, is to complement the whiskey and to draw out flavors that are either already in the whiskey or that will really augment it and amplify it. And that's really what's happened with the Calvados, and it's given an almost kind of silky, syrupy character to Dewar's 8-year-old. Did you get that when you were tasting it, Mark?
It's been a while since I've tasted the French Smooth. I tasted a pre-release sample of it, so I've not tasted it in about a year.
Yeah.
So actually, let me see. Try to think. Oh, there are times when I'm really good. Oh. I still have a wee dram of it here. It's a little cloudy.
Oh, look at that.
But looks like a little like apple cider.
That's definitely one of our lab bottles you've got there.
Let's see if this is this. I'm hoping this hasn't oxidized.
Yeah.
Because this was bottled in February of last year during the research process. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, it's turned.
Oh, has it? Oh.
It turned. Oh, well.
Yeah, too much headspace.
Too much headspace and not enough drinking it quickly enough. Well, you mentioned Aberfeldy a few minutes ago.
We'll send you another sample.
Okay. And Tyrone Cote says the Association of Halifax Regional Scotch Enthusiasts will be visiting Aberfeldy soon. Can you suggest some scents and flavors they could research to understand the base flavors of Dewar's before they get there?
Well, hi, Tyrone. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in Aberfeldy, which isn't that far away. What I always suggest to people to do is, you know, when they're in the garden, when they're in the supermarket, if they're in some sort of farmer's market, just to, you know, be aware of the aromas of the herbs the aromas of the fruit, especially sliced through a pepper and getting that, that wonderful, fresh, sharp aroma. Just being aware of, the herbal notes, and these are all aromas that we find in Scotch whisky, and floral notes as well. So roses and geraniums, just being aware of those aromas. And this then helps to build up your sensory memory, and then makes you better able to describe the whiskies, and things like honey, and and just looking at a whiskey, and even trying it with different types of food, and and that way you're kind of exploring it, and also comparing and contrasting. So not just trying one whiskey and then trying another whiskey, try them together, and then just finding out what's different about them. Why are they different? Has one been matured for a longer time than the other? Is it a different region of Scotland? Is it a different way of distilling? If it's a blended Scotch whisky, does it have an age statement? Does it not? Is there any information on its wood profile? So for me, it's always about comparing and contrasting is the best way to build up your knowledge of Scotch whisky from a sensory point of view. But also, if you want to be better at describing your whisky, then getting out and just, smelling fruit and smelling herbs and flowers, and you might get some peculiar looks from other shoppers, but hey.
Nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah, it's all part of the learning experience.
And Greg Serafian wants to know when French Smooth will be coming to France, please, or is it travel retail only? It's not travel retail exclusive, right?
No, it's not. I think it should be, if it's not in France, it should be coming to France. So it's, it's certainly in Europe. So it shouldn't be long before it's with you, but I'll certainly make inquiries, and I'll let you know, Mark.
Okay, and we'll let Greg know. We can pass that on the next time around. Chris Ratcliffe wants to know, how does it feel to be recognized as Master Blender of the Year 4 times in a row by the International Whiskey Competition? And how much satisfaction is there in having a blend you created being honored as the Whiskey of the Year?
I actually found out when I was in, Sebastian phoned me when I was in Boston, to tell me officially. And it was just wonderful. It really was. It is a team effort in whiskey. And I don't just mean the team that I have around me now. It's the people that, 32 years ago were making the malt whiskey and the grain whiskey that goes into the double 32-year-old. And that, generations nurturing whiskey, so that 32 years later, we then start the 4-stage aging process. And, whiskey making is a legacy, and it is something that's passed down through generations. And so I'm just so proud that, I represent this great whiskey. And it was just, I did not imagine that I would have won it for a 4th year with double 32. It was just, we were all so proud. We really were. And in the year that it won Whiskey of the Year, well, that means that it's been up against single malts, world whiskies, Japanese whiskies, Irish whiskies, and it's a completely blind process. So to triumph in that way, I got a message of congratulations from Facundo Bacardi. I couldn't believe it when I saw my email. I thought, oh my goodness. And Mahesh as well, sending me a message. So it meant a lot to everyone, from from my level right the way up to the top. Everybody was just buzzing about the news. And it really puts a spring in everyone's step, actually, because that what you're doing is means something, and that people are enjoying what you've put a lot of effort into creating. So yes, there was much celebration when we heard the news.
I don't think I've ever asked you, when did you discover that you had a nose for blending?
Gosh, I don't. It just kind of happens, really. When I graduated from university, I didn't think that I liked whiskey. It didn't mean anything to me. It wasn't part of my world. But then when I started studying it at the University of Strathclyde and getting involved in the sensory aspects of it, and looking at the change that a bourbon cask would make to the same spirit as opposed to what a sherry cask does to that same spirit, I suddenly thought, my goodness, this is incredible. I didn't realize there could be this variety of flavors from the cask. And then when you think about all the different distilleries, and two distilleries sitting side by side can produce a completely different flavor profile, even though they're using roughly the same processes. And then really through practice, and because we didn't just study whiskey at Strathclyde University, we were looking at olive oils, Italian olive oils. We were looking at Italian white wines from northern Italy. Everything was very specific. We even looked at halloumi cheese as well. So there was a whole myriad of different foods and wines and spirits that we were exploring. And then I would attend sensory conferences, and so I just kind of immersed myself in that world for 4 years. And at the end of it, I thought, I want to work in the whiskey industry, because I just fallen in love with everything about it. The product itself, the way it was made, the people that make it, and this whole package just drew me into whiskey. And I see Keisha there. Hi, Keisha. Lovely to hear from you. So I just, and really that's every day in whiskey, you learn something new. You open up a cask for the first time and you think, oh, I wasn't expecting that. And that's what I love about working with whiskey.
Do you think your daughters will follow you in your footsteps someday?
I don't know. I sometimes, so they're probably listening to me just now, actually, and giggling. Sometimes I'll let them nose a whiskey and I'll say, what are you getting anything from that? And they'll often say things like, biscuits, or they might say, well, I'm getting strawberries from that one. I think that was in Portuguese Smooth, actually. They picked up kind of like red berries. I don't know. They've never really, when we go up to Aberfeldy Distillery, They often say, "What's that awful smell?" It's like, that's the whiskey, darlings. But they are only 12. So I think I might be worried if they were showing any inclination to liking whiskey at the moment. But they like science, and that's very much part of working with whiskey is having an understanding, if possible, of the science of whiskey. So you never know. You never know.
Let's fast forward a few years. Let's say they do become interested when they're going to university.
Yeah.
What would you recommend a young apprentice blender or distiller study in school to be able to be ready to go after graduation?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend science subjects. And English is very important. So all the kind of core subjects will stand you in good stead for Scotch whisky. But a lot of my job is actually problem solving. So there's always something that we've got to solve. So it could be we've got too much stock, we've got too little stock, it's not the right stock, and there's always a conundrum that you've got to solve, and so some kind of the training that you get when you're at university, when you're perhaps designing experiments and then observing and then writing up your findings, all of these disciplines will help you. They might seem boring and tedious when you're at university, but all these elements will help you become, a really useful person in the whiskey industry, because that is what we're doing all the time. We're setting up experiments, albeit we're putting whiskey into casks. We're observing what happens and trying to take detailed notes, and then using that knowledge, and then so it might not work for that whiskey, but it's a good idea, so maybe it will work on another whiskey. And trying not to lose sight of the things that you've tried that maybe haven't worked, but maybe they need to be tweaked. So it's, science subjects, allowing yourself to have the discipline to carry out experiments properly and writing them up properly, so that another person can repeat your experiment. And these are really important things, because you can't just keep knowledge to yourself. You have to share your knowledge within your company, and so that other people can carry on the whiskey making legacy. So that's really important, because you hear a lot of people that they've got the information in their heads and that knowledge is power, but it's only powerful if you disseminate it to others. So that's a really important part of it as well, because the master blender is seen as a very solitary figure, but it's not that at all. I have a great team around me, and not just in the blending team, but in the wider team, in our finance teams, our new product development teams, our marketing teams, our sales teams. So we all rely on each other. And so that's another very important point, that you can't just work in isolation. You have to really work as a team.
How do you keep your blenders notebooks? Digitally? Do you have a notebook that you actually write stuff down in by hand?
Yeah,
How do
I
you
do it.
do it?
It's actually, I did have it on my desk. I think it's in my briefcase now. I write things down on my notebook, but I also keep a digital notebook as well. And I do that through Teams, actually. So I kind of have like a daily diary of things that I've done that day and how they've turned out. But then we have project spreadsheets where we will, so we'll write down physical notes, and then our sample room supervisor will then put that into the project spreadsheets, so that we've then got the notes to look back on and see, you know, what's working and what's not working. So it's a mixture of both, written notes and digitizing it.
Interesting question. You mentioned the wider team within Dewar's. Ben Marnock was stopping at the services on the M74 recently and noticed the Dewar's site at ONeill. What happens there, and do you go there much? What's going on there?
Yeah, so ONeill is it's a huge site, and maturation and blending happens at ONeill. So I don't go down there very often, but it's about a half an hour drive from where we are. But you know, occasionally we'll go down there for meetings. A couple of my team were actually down there the other day to have a look at casks. So what happens is that they disgorge all the casks for, it could be white label. They'll do Dewar's 12 down there. They quite often do Dewar's 8. They will then, once it's blended, once it's been double aged, they then send the samples up to us in Glasgow, and we'll test the spirit and tell them whether it's okay to go, or if there's something about it that's not quite right that has to be investigated. So yes, it's a huge site, and that's where the blending, maturation and blending happens. We have a smaller maturation and blending site in Glasgow. But in Glasgow, as well as maturation and blending, we also prepare the spirit for bottling, and bottling also takes place in Glasgow as well. So we've got two main sites for maturation.
Chris Ratcliffe wants to know, with all the finishes you've done recently, what other finishes are exciting or could be interesting to experiment with? What are you playing around with that you can talk about?
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking at, so something we're interested in just now is different species of oak and what that brings to the whiskey. So obviously we've been doing work with Mizunara, which has produced our beautiful Japanese smooth, and you know, so that kind of piqued our interest in, you know, I wonder what Scottish oak would do, or you know, oak from around the world. So that's something that we're looking at. But what is really exciting for us is that we are planning on building the Dewar's Creative Hub. So we've got the plans in place to create a building where we will all be sitting, and it will have an experimental lab. It will have a new blending room. It'll have meeting rooms and enough space for us to bring in, you know, creatives, you know, our brand teams, and to allow us to discover more about whiskey and what whiskey can be in the future. And so it won't just be about finishes, but it'll be about the whole production process of whiskey. And, you know, we want it to be a place where graduates will look and say, wow, was that the whiskey industry? You know, that's what I want to do. Because I think sometimes graduates look at the whiskey industry and they say, oh, you know, it looks a bit old and it looks a bit, you know, set in its ways. But actually, you know, the whiskey making process has evolved. And, you know, we're always looking at ways of saving water. Even though it rains an awful lot in Scotland, we do a lot at our distilleries in order to ensure that we're not wasting water and that we're not wasting energy. So, you know, so that is a really important part of it as well. And so these are all things that we want to look at in our new creative hub. And so we hope to break ground on that project, provided everything gets, you know, approved in the first quarter of next year. So that will be, you know, when we'll have the space to really look at questions that we've been asking for a while, and hopefully this will send us on the way to getting some more answers.
One question from Greg. Do you think that the rules should be changed for Scotch whiskey regarding the use of woods other than oak? What would you consider? Would you consider other varieties of wood? For instance, in France, they can use other wood types than oak, for instance.
So the rules have been broadened from the SWA that we can use, for example, mezcal. We wouldn't have been able to use that prior to the rules being broadened, and that was in 2018. One of the tenets of Scotch whisky is that it's got to taste as, you know, Scotch whisky has always tasted. And I think maybe the concern with using wood that isn't oak is that it would then lead to a flavour profile that we don't recognise as being Scotch whisky. And oak is very good at, you know, containing liquid. And so perhaps if we went to use other types of wood, then we would maybe suffer more losses than we do now. So they would, but you never know. I mean, it could be that we have to diversify in wood because of climate change or whatever other factors there may be. So it's not something that I believe is being considered, but who knows? You know, we certainly, you know, as a company feel that there is enough scope at the moment to provide a diverse array of flavors in, you know, within Scotch whisky, and we just have to be careful that we're not going to dilute the great things about Scotch whisky by introducing things that people they don't recognise as being Scotch whisky.
I'm curious about the single malts as well, because you're also responsible for the single malt portfolio from Aberfeldy, Royal Brackley, Craigellachie, Altmore, and the Deveron.
Yeah.
What's new on those whiskeys that we should be watching for?
Yeah, well, we're still continuing on our exceptional cask range, which is covering really all of our single malts. We did a refresh of Royal Brackley. So Royal Brackley was completely finished in Oloroso sherry, and the ages were 12, 16, and 21, and the strength was 40%. we changed the look of the packaging completely. It's really, really beautiful. We increased the strength to 46. We swapped the age of the 16 to an 18-year-old. We kept the 12 finished in Oloroso, but the 18, we filled that into Palo Catardo sherry casks, and the 21 is a blend of Oloroso, Palo Catardo, and Pedro Jimenez finishings. So it's a really beautiful range, and we took the learnings of the Dewar's double range, which, you know, for the 21 was Oloroso, the 27 was Palo Catardo, the 32 was Pedro Jimenez, and we applied that to the malts. So, you know, that's one of the wonderful things about, you know, being responsible for the blends and the malts, is that you can use your learnings in one and apply it to another. And then we just took it one step further by having the blend of the 3 different types of finishes in the 21-year-old. So the malts are fascinating. And, you know, what we love to find are the young sherries. So, you know, we've had some beautiful Altmores that have been in sherry, you know, all of their lives. And, you know, one of them, I think it was at 11 years old. And wow, you know, you thought it was a 25-year-old. It just, you know, tasted so mature, so much to offer. And, you know, so that's, you know, if you get good spirit and a really good cask, it's amazing the wonderful results that you can get. And so the malts are a joy, and, you know, we love working on them. And, you know, we've had a lot of success with French red wine finishes. So we had the Pomerol, the Pauillac, Côte Rôtie. We've done a Tuscan Bulgari cask, a Napa Cabernet Sauvignon, 15-year-old Aberfeldy. Working on a really exciting project that I probably can't talk about, but it's in another region of the world that makes beautiful wine. And we're actually going to get to talk about the winery, because we'll have a partnership with them. So
is it north or south of the equator?
South, I think. Yes, south.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So
just trying to Greg's guessing Shiraz from Australia, but we'll see what Dave Kuhn wants to know. If there's a bottle of whiskey out there that you don't own but you've always wanted, you have access to everything you want, but he's curious, is there a bottle out there you'd like to get your hands on that you haven't been able to yet?
I guess one thing that I would love, and I won't ever get to do this because it's impossible, but I would love to try, you know, like the first bottle of Dewar's White Label, when it was first bottled, because I'm always getting asked, you know, does it taste the same as when it did then? And I said, well, I don't know. I wasn't there at the time, because that was the start of the 20th century. But it would be lovely to compare Dewar's then with Dewar's now. And, you know, obviously, you know, whiskey, there wasn't, we didn't have the understanding of whiskey then that we do now. You know, we know what the cask does to the whiskey. We know how to store them properly. And, so, and I think Greg is asking there about, an old bottle of Dewar's, but it's not the same. Whiskey does change in the bottle. It's not hermetically sealed. So there's going to be interactions with the outside environment and the inside environment. So, you perhaps can get an impression of what it was like, but you don't actually know, what it was like when it was bottled. So that would be the one that I would probably like to get my hands on. But I'd have to get Doctor Who to take me back in his TARDIS, probably.
And Chris Ratcliffe has an addition to that question. Is there a bottle you always keep available in the lab or at home? What's your go-to?
Dewar's 15. That's the one that I, was my first blend. So I guess that's the one that kind of takes you back. It's like a kind of reset. So yes, I would say that's one. Aberfeldy 12 as well is another one that's just it's always there, and it always gives you the interest that you're looking for in a whiskey as well. So yeah, but Dewar's 12 in its new bourbon home is one that I really love, and I think because it was so unexpected that we would get this volume of flavor from these amazing bourbon casks. So we have a lot to thank the US for. Put on my Stetson.
And on that note, we'll thank Stephanie McLeod from Dewar's for joining us, spending the last hour with us talking about whiskeys. I've got a program note for you. Next week, we're going to be in London for the Whiskey Show. And we will be doing a live webcast, but we're going to do it at a special time, 5 p.m. UK time, not 5 p.m. New York time, 10 p.m. London time. The show ends at 9 o'clock, so it just wouldn't work to try to do our show at 10 o'clock. So we're going to go at 5 p.m. London time next Friday from the Whiskey Show at Old Billingsgate in Central City, London, in the city of London, right along the River Thames. It's going to be fun, and we're going to have some special guests, and we'll have a lot of fun. But Stephanie, thank you for joining us. And once again, congratulations on this. I think you've nailed it. This is just a stunning blend.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. And I
want to correct myself. It's a stunning whiskey. It's a stunning whiskey, period.
Yeah.
Blend or not, It's a stunning whiskey.
Yeah, it is. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks for having me on. And slange to you, Mark, and
thank
Christine, and everyone out there. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And we will see you all very soon. See you next week. The podcast will be out this weekend, and we're going to have a little bit of fun with that one as well. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.